ADHD Babes, the podcast, a podcast hosted by the ADHD Babes community for the community. Please note, nothing mentioned during the podcast is meant as a diagnosis. If you believe you have ADHD, please seek professional advice and visit or join ADHDbabes.com for help with diagnosis. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. And now, you're listening to the next episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. Thank you to everyone who's joined us by listening so far. Don't forget to follow so you never miss an episode, and also rate, review and share so that others can find us too. Today's episode is hosted by me, Niquelle, and today we're going to be discussing how ADHD and racial burnout can intersect, and how exhaustion is often misread as laziness, especially for Black women who are still expected to perform, produce and hold everything together. Joining in on the discussion, we will be joined by Juliana. Please, Jules, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jules, also known as Juliana. I am ADHD podcast, the podcast producer. Outside of that, I am also a writer, screenwriter, stage writer, stage. Wow. You know, you're thinking, what is it? Is it stage? Yes, stage writer, all the things writing I do, and as well as a filmmaker as well. And I'm excited. And this time around, I am sort of on the camera here and there, but I thought I'd join in this conversation. So, hi everyone.
Thank you, Jules. As mentioned today, we're going to be talking about ADHD and racialized burnout and what happens when exhaustion gets misread as laziness. So, thank you, Jules. You know when you wake up and already tired and you can't really explain why? Like nothing's really happened yet, but your body already feels heavy, your mind's already full, and you're just done before the day's even started. From the outside, it doesn't make sense because you're still getting up, you're still working, you're still doing what needs to be done. But inside, something feels off, drained, flat, or constantly on edge. Today, we're talking about that feeling and how for a lot of us, it gets labeled as laziness, when actually it might be something else entirely. We're getting into ADHD and racial burnout and what it feels like, how it shows up, and how it's often misunderstood. So, with that in mind, I would like to think about what it means to be racially exhausted. Often it's not one big event, it's often cumulative. It builds over time through daily interactions, awareness, and the need to constantly adjust how you show up. Constant awareness, watching your tone, your reactions, your body language, and feeling like you're always on in certain spaces. So, what does it mean to you to be racially exhausted, Jules?
Oh, well, where do I start? I think when I think of the term itself, racially exhausted, and kind of being in, I guess if I look at it in the sense of grown up in the UK, I've lived in various different areas where it's been multicultural, and also areas where I've been the absolute minority, and you stick out, and you physically feel it, you see it. And what does racial exhaustion look like or feel like for me? I think it's constantly going into spaces, and I think my initial thing is being in spaces, particularly where you know that you're probably the one of few, and having to either mentally prepare yourself for that, and mentally prepare yourself for the conversation that is to come, or maybe not a conversation that is to come, or maybe you'll be ignored. So there's so many different things, and that in itself, that's before getting to, say, an event, or say workplace, or say an environment, and that is extremely exhausting. I found for a very long time, and I know with ADHD, it's you pick up on patterns, you pick up on, cues and things that someone hasn't said, or someone has said something, and you repeat and you replay what that person has said. And it might just be, some people might just see it as like, oh, they were just playing around. but the undertone is microaggressions. There is I guess sort of kind of like a discriminatory undertone where, or unconscious bias, where you kind of take it away in the moment. You don't say anything, and then you take it away, and then you replay all of those things over and over and over again. And I've found that when I've been in environments, and I guess I can also talk about the workplace, where I've been the only black woman or the only black person, having to feel like, what version of people am I going to get today, or what version of myself do I have to show today? Because if I don't talk enough, then I'm not collaborative, I'm not engaging. If I don't go to the pub, then I don't like the team, or I don't know what, I'm not integrating myself with the team. So those sort of kind of like scenarios, not even scenarios, those sort of experiences really play into kind of like eventually feeling like I can't, like I'm just so tired, like I can't do this, because you're constantly having to think, how do I have to show up? I guess that's kind of like a little bit of what that exhaustion has looked like for me.
Completely relate to those like workplace scenarios, especially. I think for me, when it's exhausted and it's to do with my race, I think those moments when you almost feel there's a performative element to it. So there's a policing of what you're wearing, a policing of what you're saying, a hyper consideration for how others are feeling about you just being in the
Hmm.
space,
Yeah.
and having to consider that constantly. That's really, really tiring for me. I also am really empathic, so I can always sense tone, I can see pattern, I can feel when a vibe changes very quickly. Um, and a lot of the time, something that is just like curiosity, like you asking why to a thing, that's challenge. Or and just realizing that sometimes the same information can come out of somebody else's mouth and be received completely different, and when it comes out of yours, there's such kind of apprehension or resistance to one, be listened to, for sure, that like ignoring is a big thing I've felt a lot of in a lot of spaces. But then also that nuance of how the body is saying so much to people before I even said a word to anyone. Like there's
Mm.
so many assumptions made about me, and that sometimes means I'm not allowed to be given room to just be myself and introduce who I am fully. So there's already, you kind of enter that space with the idea of people already have a preconceived idea of you, and then
Yeah.
you're either disappointing people because they've already had an assumption of what that is, and then they act according to their own disappointment, which is a projection and nothing to do with me.
Hmm.
But I have to then manage their feelings about not being that, or I have to. I'm a shock to their preconception. So I'm not the black they had in mind, and I say the black in like in inverted commas there, because sometimes I've realized I am in some people's heads just a black body. I'm not Niquelle, I'm not these nuance of intersections. I am just another black person in that space that they have
Yeah.
assumed is how whatever their ideas they've made up in their mind are, and I either fail or confirm that bias in their head.
Hmm.
And sometimes I'm just like, gosh, can we like let people just define who they are in this space?
Yeah.
Because that's tiring. And then that like sleep, when it's really like, ugh, I'm done, tired. Like scenarios, I'll dream that. I'll be dreaming things, and they'll come out and you wake up almost anxious
Yeah.
because you've played out things that have replayed or things that are going to play because you've based it on patterns you've already seen, and you're just like mentally preparing for what's going to be a heavier or lighter day depending on the mood or depending on
Hmm.
the weather. Like it's such fickle things that change what you're received as.
Yeah.
And
And
we got it's long. Yes, go Juice.
and yeah, and going back to what you said, like how it sits in the body, and how long term the the damaging effect, because obviously we know already there are studies that are taking place in the sense of like stress, how stress causes autoimmune diseases, how stress can lead to death, and particularly with black women, black bodies. And so those sort of like environments, or not being able to, or having to perform, knowing that this isn't you, or having to live an expectation of what society or what individuals within certain environments is expected of you, at some point it gets it just starts to kind of like, I remember sort of feeling like, oh yeah, I'm going to go in for my first day, or I'm going to go into this setting, I'm going to be jovial and try and be welcoming. And I know that's not me, and that's not necessarily like I can't be bubbly. There are days where I just want to get in, get the work done, and be going. Do you know what I mean? And so after a while, it's kind of like when you don't show up as that person, it's immediately like, oh, something's wrong with Juliana, or something's wrong with Jules. What's going on? Da 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 da. Then you become the subject or topic of the office or the space, and you're just kind of like, rah, can I not have the space to be sad? Or can I not have the space to want to focus? Can I not have the space to just want to be and then go? And we're not given that. And so when we are not in spaces that feel that we can wholeheartedly be ourselves, eventually with time, and what I found is that I become so tired, and it becomes a thing where when I wake up, I'm like, I can't go to work today. And I don't know about you, there's been times where I've just been like, in my head, the night before, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go into work, I'm going to go into work, I'm going to go. In the morning, by the time I've thought out scenarios, thought out, oh, who am I going to be dealing with today? You look at your calendar, or you look at who might be whatever, you're just like, nah, I can't. I'm back to the work, exhausted. I'm exhausted, and I'd rather sit in my bed and I'd rather rest than having to deal or do all this performance for people that probably in spaces where, when it comes to, oh, who's hardworking, or who would you recommend for a raise, or kind of like
Those
a
promotions.
promotion, they would not remember you.
Yeah, I definitely empathize with the feelings of not wanting to go in, but I've also been burdened with a lot of leadership roles, and being a manager at times means there's this added weight that comes with like, I'm young, I'm black, I'm migrant heritage, working class, like all these other things come into play. But then I'm also holding the responsibility of the department or the whatever. And a lot of the time when given those kinds of roles, what I find is the expectations are far higher for me. Like I can't just be stressed. What? Never. Stress doesn't happen to us. Like, so that like it actually ends up being quite costly to me. So
Yeah.
that working up of anxiety, like we don't already get stressed because we're just time blindness anyway. I end up like taking cabs and taking, because it's just the windows become so small. I still got to get there on time, so I end up taking a cab, or I haven't made lunch or didn't make lunch in the morning because I've been so worked up that morning, or so it does come at a cost. Which actually nicely brings us into that second question about how our ADHD comes into play, because of course we have traits like focus, our energy, and the kind of follow throughs that happen as part of being people that have ADHD. But actually when you add that racial exhaustion on top, that depletion can get really labeled as laziness or lack of effort, being unmotivated, struggling to start, but you still are expected to perform, and sometimes do way more than what people mentally will see. So for you, how does your ADHD sometimes, or the traits that you experience, get mixed up in that kind of misreading or mislabeling?
Yeah. So I've obviously mentioned that I was late diagnosed, and I was diagnosed at 31 or 30, well, maybe a little bit later, I can't remember, 32. And I sort of remember kind of feeling like, oh, okay, this makes sense, but also feeling like I don't know how to explain this to people that I'm working with, and they probably won't believe me because I've been masking or high functioning. And I know some people might feel a bit, you know, up and down about that term in itself, but I've been high functioning and performing as somebody who is able to do it, but behind closed doors. Even my wellness has suffered, my well-being, my mental health has suffered tremendously. And what I find is that even in the workplace, I am able, because I also, like my sort of like 9 to 5 is I work with admin. So I'm a personal assistant, and I've worked for various different sort of kind of like heads. So I've worked with presidents who need constant organizing and support, and some people who are self-sufficient. So it kind of like is in the middle a little bit. And I hear a lot of the time, how are you able to organize for other people and you have ADHD? I said, this is practice. This is years of practice, but also neglecting myself. And what I found with my ADHD, how my ADHD really came into effect was more to do with my own personal life than, say, my work life. Because again, it's having to perform, it's having to show up and not allow for them to say that the one time Juliana doesn't come in, or the one time Juliana's unwell, oh, see, Juliana's not in again. And it's just kind of like, oh, so you guys have been watching the fact that I have been in this whole time, but you've been watching that this one day where I've been unwell. And so you're just having to kind of show up in that sense. And my ADHD at home was struggling to just do daily tasks, just really struggling to show up for myself, struggling to even just like clean. I remember with one job where I was able to work from home, I would still show up to work, but I probably hadn't bathed in like 3 or 4 days. So I was neglecting a lot of that stuff to do with my well-being and sort of like my mental health, and which then resulted into like a major burnout. And I remember being fired from a job, that in itself is another conversation, being fired from that job and just immediately losing all of my confidence. Because again, when you are working under people, or you're managing certain people who have certain expectations, they treat, say, their PAs or their EAs like absolute shit. And you just have to accept it. And I sort of remember when they let me go, feeling like, am I not a good worker? Am I not good enough to do this? And just feeling like I couldn't wake up. My mental health just went really downhill. And that's where the exhaustion came in for me, and also kind of like in line with my ADHD, feeling like I just, not being able to look after my mental health and look after my well-being being the thing. And I don't know about you, and I think you mentioned kind of like feeling like an empath. And sometimes as empaths, you neglect yourself because you want to make sure when you feel like someone is hurt, or when you feel like someone's upset, the sort of thing is to want to make sure you don't further upset them, even though you might be feeling like I don't appreciate, or you might have boundaries and they might have overstepped the boundaries. Sometimes you find, and some people are really good, some people have been able to kind of like differentiate and be like, actually, I don't accept that, and I'm going to express. I struggled with that. And so I would neglect my boundaries, or, being able to speak up for myself because someone else is upset. And that shows up again back to being in the body and stuff like that. So I think I've just waffled on and on and on. But I
No,
hope
you
that makes
haven't
sense.
waffled. I completely, yeah, I relate to so much of that kind of feeling of needing to show up constantly, and the expectation that that's always going to be consistent, there's a lot less room for us to be, wavering human beings like everyone else. I think for me, if I'm like looking at it trait by trait, I was also late diagnosed. So I was 30, almost 31 in 2024. And it's actually, my job, I at that time was a head teacher of a new provision, a new college that we built from scratch. I was It was a combination of like all the arts things that I've been doing and all of the education things, and it was to create a new college provision that's now in prestigious theatre, dance theatre in East London. And for me, as someone from Hackney, that was like, oh my god, perfect job, perfect thing. So of course, it became also a hyper focus interest project, right? So I have to give that caveat of the appropriateness of like interest, because it meant for me the stakes were so much higher. I belong to this community, I really care about what the thing is. But then I hadn't been in the charitable sector. I hadn't worked in the charitable sector. It is a charity, but it's really quite corporate in its kind of functioning. Um, and gosh, I'm from the education world, but bloody hell, that sector is wild. And the term microaggressions always grates me because people compare it to like this whole like death by a thousand paper cut thing. Microaggressions are not micro sometimes. They're very intentional and they're very kind of entitled, but it's because there's never been anyone in the space to check that. So it's just the behavior and that becomes the culture. And that was the case in this theatre in particular, where it was so culturally ingrained to speak about black bodies with so much disrespect, regard certain black cultural mediums with such disrespect. I remember sitting in an artistic planning meeting and they were literally discussing a person who was an Olivier Award winner, who they were floating about online, like, as well, we need a black person who can speak about, and then you spoke about a black woman, we need someone who can speak for the continent of Africa. Like, that's the level of ignorance that I walked into in the first month of my role. So when I then faced that in month 1 of my job, I was then like, okay, so this is the wider organization, and had to make a decision because I also had this opportunity to build what felt like the perfect role and perfect provision. So once I decided to take it on board, it also came with a history of we were an offshoot of an established thing that was there for 20 plus years. So we were then also inheriting the ways that black department had been treated historically also. But I wasn't the same kind of black that they had been experiencing. So everything I was bringing to the table was rubbing feathers, and I was the like receipts. Because of my short-term memory and also having experienced quite a few like gaslight situations, being in the education system, I am the paper trail queen. So they weren't trying to run no gaslight on me. Like I was citing their own words in meetings back. So they very quickly learnt like, I'm gonna ask the question. So how are we doing that? Is there fairness? Is there a rubric? So it meant it very quickly backs were up and people were like, who is this fetus at our table now trying to ruffle things? But also what it then meant was I had to very quickly find allies in terms of kind of who else actually shared the stake of what this passion is to make this thing come to light, who understood the world that we were trying to kind of envision, because it also had no precedents. This is the first of its kind, it never existed. So there were so many things of like, you're really trusting my imagination to create a thing, look at all the patterns and do all of that, which is the ADHD superpower in my opinion. We will find a problem and find a solution, which this course for me really is solving a thing. So it was fueling that dopamine heat for me. But at the same time, I was facing on a personal level so much violence, so many aggressions, so much like blatant racism at times that it was just like to the point that I actually like you'd think it's small, right? But even things like interoception, right? Us sensing our bodily temperatures, hungers, needing to pee, all of these things. When you're in an environment where there's care in the space, you might have someone say, "Oh, I'm going to lunch. You come in?" Just those little invitations, just those little,
Yep.
bearing in mind I'm a new member of staff, it's open plan officers. Those invitations never came. I didn't have a team when I first came in post. I had to hire that team. I had to, because there was no provision, there was no thing. Who's that person doing that for me? So that meant I had lots of times in open plan spaces just being in like blinder mode. And that's how I kind of was expected to learn the organization. And, so you very quickly become quite isolated. Then I'm quite used to that experience. So I very quickly found who are my peoples. But then through that, also then you have to almost play this like hypervigilance. So that puts your body into fight or flight mode. Because you're constantly like dialing up or dialing down your energy. And sometimes we have no spoons to pour from. Sometimes I'm tired. And like there'll be days that, because it was a theatre, we'd have like shows after the working day till 10 p.m. I'm in there since 10 a.m. And like the expectation is like, oh, well, we'll do that and we'll just toilet. By the time I had quit this job, I had over 100 toils, more than 100 toils. But it wasn't because I was just in hyperfocus and not checking my own time blindness. No, it was because actually the whole culture of the environment was that everyone was expected to work more, and especially the brown bodies there, because if you didn't, it would be oh, what's going on? Or suddenly the brown bodies in the space signed off on stress and they'd vanish for a short period of time, or they'd come in and they wasn't a right fit for the culture. Bearing in mind, because I was a manager, I had 6 months probation. 6 months. And in that 6 months, I was expected to create a course from scratch that didn't exist, launch a website, recruit successfully for a first place that we didn't even have a building for. And bearing in mind, this is like children's education, so a college. And we weren't even in the place. Like, it was a miracle to have pulled that off and got it over the line. But I actually also, by that March, I started in September. By that March, I said, we're not going ahead in 2024. We're not opening 2024. And that took me pushing back against my line manager, who didn't have a Scooby about education, but constantly was like the kind of yes man. And he would, in conversation with me one-to-one, yeah. And then you get in a board meeting and he said totally different thing.
Completely think.
And I'm like, what? And those moments happen so frequently, but I also didn't have any support systems in the venue. Even HR, which was a black woman at the time running the whole of HR is to work for the organization. So like, it's a dangerous middle of like, you're looking for familiarity and support systems, but a lot of the time, we're facing rejection sensitivity, we're facing microaggressions, we're facing a really unhealthy, unsustainable environment for our bodies. So like, you're starting to eat less, you're starting to kind of cram meals in between because the expectation is you're doing more and that's normalized. And you take a day off and someone notices your days off, but someone's missing for 2 weeks on end and it's like, I hope you had a good break. It's like, huh? Do we not break the same? Am I meant to be a machine, or like rest is not the same thing for us?
I have a story about that, but I'll let you finish.
So I just think there was a lot of things which at the time I didn't even know I had ADHD. And it was the environment actually that I became disabled by, because by the time I got home, I couldn't cook, I couldn't laundry, I couldn't, like, all the things. And I've had a portfolio career since I was 17. Like, I've always had more than one job. I've always been able to juggle. This pushed my systems into overdrive to a level that was like, wow. And then when I actually started to look at the patterns of the organization, the people that were suddenly falling ill were the black women. The people that were suddenly, the healthiest, we're paying extra to do massage and float and this and that. That was literally not well-being. That was keep ourselves alive. At what cost? Because that's half our salaries we're spending to even do that. And it's just, yeah, so much of it was traits that I could see I had built coping mechanisms for myself that appeared to people as high functioning, which I think is just high masking to the detriment of our bodies.
Yep.
But it became so unsustainable because I was also given no grace and no space to have variance and be a fallible human with, a womb and periods, number one, because our hormones doing madness also.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't the space I was given. And that really made me make a hard decision. And actually, I ended up quitting that job before the school even opened in 2025.
Oh wow.
So,
But
yeah,
but in a sense, I know you protected yourself because it got to
had
that
to,
point where you had to.
had to.
And that's the unfortunate thing when it comes to us as black women or black bodies, and then on top of that being disabled and having ADHD and mental health, that you no longer have the choice, because it's either this will consume me and make me worse, or I stay, or I go and think about surviving or staying alive, you know. And what happens is, as well, what is also interesting, as you said, that those feelings sort of stay and stick with you onto, say, the next project or the next thing that you then go on to do, because, like you said, you're hypervigilant. You're looking out for, okay, how is this organization run? How do they do things here? I hope it's not something where I'm going to have to deal with what I had to deal with before. And it's so crazy because, like, yeah, thinking about the pattern stuff is just kind of like, I'm kind of like, now going forward and places I've been, I'm very much kind of like, oh, I give very little away. I think I was 4 months in to my part-time job, and I didn't tell them what my nickname was, and they called me Juliana, and I must have said it on accident. I said, "Oh, Jules," and they were like, and my manager was like, "Oh, is that what you go by?" I was like, "Oh crap." I was like, "Yeah," because I think also as well, because I have gotten to a place where, once there's familiarity,
Hmm.
there feels like there's a sense of kind of like, oh yeah, Juliana's, or she's accepting, or we're welcoming into her space, but then also you find yourself having to do more work because now you're even more seen,
Hmm.
because, oh, you've given them a little bit about yourself. It's like, oh yeah, we know that about you now. And so, oh yeah, you're going to come to this, and you're going to come to that, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. And whilst that feels great, and I know that that is not good for
Hmm.
me, in the sense that being in a space where I have to work for 8 hours and then to then go and then socialize, I know that's just not my thing. I just know I'm not at that space. And so even when I got this role, because I was out of work for quite a number of years, and I
Hmm.
would kind of work sporadically at different things, I remember feeling like I can only do part time.
Hmm.
That's what works for me. And also, it has to allow me to work from home,
Hmm.
and with the option of being hybrid and going into the office as and when. Because I even think, and you got me thinking, and now I'm going on a tangent. I don't know if you've heard of this lady called Emma Greed, or she is the founder of Skims,
Okay.
who obviously Kim Kardashian is a co-founder as well, and
Hmm.
she's got quite a few companies that she's opened up.
Hmm.
And recently there had been conversations that she went on to Kiki Palmer's podcast
Hmm.
and sort of kind of said, we women need to go back into the office. Working from home doesn't work because you're not in the spaces. um you're basically going to be missing out on opportunities for promotion, and being involved in the conversations, and blah blah blah
Hmm.
blah blah. And looking at her as, well, Americans will consider her a black woman. Obviously in the UK, she's I see her as mixed race. She's a mixed race woman,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's what she identifies as.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately, I was like, "Girl, if you don't go sit down,
Mm-hmm.
especially as a black woman,
Mm-hmm.
going
Mm-hmm.
back into the office
Mm-hmm.
because you're guaranteed if you're in the spaces to be able to be there." You're guaranteed promotion. That is not the case for black women. And it felt like it was a catcall to say, like, you guys over there, we know that you don't want to go back into the office. Be going back to the office when it's detrimental to our health.
Mm-hmm.
We've been there. And then also the fact that in COVID, we know that working from home works. There's studies that have said productivity has increases when people are able to work from home. So, sis, you coming on the couch to come and tell people to come back, women especially, to come back into the office,
Yeah.
to come and out work,
Mm.
was mind-boggling to me. And especially, I know as a black woman, that has never been a thing where it has worked.
So interesting you saying that, because I think for me that the physical space of working, because even when I was English teaching mainstream like full time, it's also, you can't work from home bar
Yeah,
lockdown. Like you have to be in the building pretty much. And when it was lockdown, so many teachers were like freaking out, but I loved it because it meant there was one, I did more than one thing at once because the level of teaching like massively dropped for the amount of provision because it was digital, which I absolutely agree. Take that blue light down for them youths. But I think the level of flexibility it gave my life allowed for less rigidity in a way that allowed, like, I still was, had the routine, which really helps the like systems part of me, but I also had like breaks and I could be in the garden and I could actually have time to make my proper lunch rather than buy it, and these kind of things that had a better balance during those
yeah,
periods. But I also think where we looked at those transitions of spaces, like the space itself, like the light in a lot of offices are that harsh, bright white light. I have found out that I am light sensitive and sound sensitive, like specifically those sensory issues are really heightened for me. That and like excessive screen time, like it will hurt my head I will get migraines, and I actually ended up wearing screen based glasses
glasses. Yeah,
being in that environment because there's hardly any natural light in. It's so unnatural to the body that it feels, and we need to frolic. Black bodies especially, we need vitamin D. Even if we get hardly any sunlight, we need sunlight. We need to be in green spaces. Like I found out recently that especially in cities, they plant a lot of male trees which are not fruit bearing, which is why our hay fever and all of these symptoms that they make us ill, and it makes us not want to be in green space because they're not really conducive to life.
yeah,
And those kinds of things means we're living in quite sterile conditions. And I think if we're looking like way back genes where we've come from, we're usually used to the land. We're used to non-clinical settings in the ways that we work traditionally in the West, at least. And it does mean that for our bodies, like we're sitting in chairs for days, for hours.
yeah. Hours.
Our
Yeah,
hips are meant to shake, not sit for that long. Usually you would at least have a walk to where you're going, or we can get a bus one stop sometimes. And like, the natural conditions that we're in makes our bodies a lot more tensed
yeah.
anyway. And then add that emotional burden, add those kind of mental burdens, you're gonna hold so much, and unless there's a space to kind of take that out of the body, it's then they're gonna just accumulate, and I think that's what gets quite tiring, because sometimes you're waking up, you don't even know why your shoulders are by your ears, but the tension your neck has locked, your jaw is doing
Yep.
and that then plays out into your face, it plays out into your throat. Like I know when I'm getting ill, my throat starts going. But I also know if my throat goes, my womb starts going mad. I get stomach issues. I get a flare up, and it's all linked. They're all linked. They're all kind of connected. But I do think the body work that is involved in those environments is less focused on, because we're told an office is the only space that is conducive to work and productivity, you
Yeah.
know, and I don't think that's true anymore. And I think coming out of that space last June, actually, so it's almost been a year, I also chose to massively drop my hours, and it's meant at least, a 20K drop in my overall salary, but I would pay 40 for the well-being balance I now have, the amount of energy I now have, a level of sensitivity I now have to my body. Like, I was so busy with firefighting that I couldn't even sense what my body needed anymore. And I was becoming that numbed. And actually, I got to August of 24, my kidneys actually flared up. I got prescribed codeine. Like, that's the level of mad my body was going through. And I still, till the next June, was there to help get it over the line, because they actually were going to cut the whole thing after all of that. Like,
What?
yeah, madness, madness, madness. I'm telling you, yeah, it's a wild place to be. But it was also a real lesson for me in terms of the trauma attached to it, but the learnings. As I said before, I was never in a space like that prior. Now I have archetypes that I like. I will never not be able to see those traits in those people anywhere else.
Yeah.
I will never not be able to kind of spot something way earlier than it took for me to get to that level of harm in my own body. I could never let it get to that level again, ever, 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 ever again, because there's certain things that now I'm like, you're that, ah, straight away. And I've gone into other spaces, like in the space between last June and now, which is what, April. I've probably had about 4 like contractual jobs, but also short contracts on purpose, because I can't do the sustained draining of my energy without it feeding my spirit back anymore. And the second that I feel that harm, I'll make it be known, and it's in and out, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
And it has meant that I'm gonna be more selective in the kind of work I take on. It does mean that I'm, really careful in terms of, do your values on paper look good? Yeah, maybe on your website, but in that interview, I am interviewing them on a trillion in ways that I've seen them like, oh,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah,
rightly so.
and
Rightly
rightly
so.
so.
I think a lot of the time people go in thinking, oh, yeah, they're interviewing me.
Mm-mm.
Nah, you're interviewing them as well. And sometimes they also forget, they are being interviewed too.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're not going to do, like you said, you might look pretty on your website and on paper, but you're not going to trick me.
Mm-hmm. So I do
You're
think it's
not going to.
given tools. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? To not be tricked into assumptions of a space because of, popularity and stuff, but also for us to navigate. I'm now navigating also with the awareness that I have ADHD, which I can't lie, despite the madness that happened, I'm glad I now know that and have that
Yeah.
confirmation, because it also means there are certain access things that I need to ask, and it doesn't necessarily need to be straight away in the interview, but there are certain things that I will, what's your way you discuss certain pockets of people? I'm asking those questions from go, because if I can already, we're very good at the vibe check. We're very good at feeling what is off. And I felt that in some interview spaces, and asked them, what happened? Are you okay? And when you see someone start flapping and
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'd
Yeah.
rather not, you know. And I've
Thanks,
actually
you've been
turned a
great.
few jobs down in this space of time. And the agents, because I'm signed up to a few like teaching agencies as well. A few of them are like, wow, you're really committing to this part-time thing, because obviously like there's English teachers jobs all the time, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I am, because I'm looking after my health right now, and that's
Yeah.
my only priority. And for them, rest is such a radical thing, and I can't, like, I still struggle to understand how, after the amounts black bodies, especially black female bodies, have been through, why we can't see that rest is deserved. And rest is a right in the same way that everybody deserves it. But I think even in my choice to prioritize that, it has allowed for such beautiful conversations about how we can resist and preserve for a more sustainable working life, a sustainable future. I feel like I have more time for my family, my friends, and all of those things that I think get neglected when you're so like consumed by the other bits of harm.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really kind of positive in that way to have gone through these things, but also get tools from it. And that brings us to our last question. When you start to understand your ADHD and that kind of exhaustion that you experience in combination, it could shift how you see yourself, especially if you've been carrying, those labels that are mislabels of laziness, etc., for years. So, how do you go about kind of reframing your energy or letting go of those ideas of doing more and recognizing what you're actually carrying? And if that obviously doesn't fix things overnight, how you maybe speak about yourself, and how do you give yourself permission to not blame yourself for everything? So, what have you done to kind of shift or reframe that energy?
Cool. So I think for me, I guess the first thing which we've kind of like touched on, is realizing that the typical system of work life, that the patriarchal world has built, is doesn't work for me as a black woman and someone with ADHD. So working part time, being able to space out my days in which I work, has been really great, and it has also reframed my mind in a sense that that choice is helpful for me in the long run. And I wouldn't get to a place. I will no longer. Obviously, like sometimes you do have burnout, but the burnout experience beforehand would never be as catastrophic in the future. So realizing that this is the system that works for me, working part time, also being able to still do my creative stuff. So the days where I'm not working, I can still write, because when I was working full time, I wasn't able to. And I remember sort of kind of like back in the day where I was working full time and then I had an agent. Unfortunately, I don't have an agent anymore, but I remember sort of kind of like she'd been like, "Oh, have you got any stuff that you're kind of writing?" I was thinking, "Girl, if only. I don't have time to do it." And it's not like a thing where I can just drop my full time job and be like, "Yeah, let's write anything. I'm going to get paid because my agent is here." I still have to pay bills, and so realizing that actually I now have the opportunity to write. I now have the opportunity to kind of like take the space, take the time to chill, but also the things that has helped is listening to my body. Before, I don't think I ever was listening. I was literally, like you said, fight or flight. It's literally, or even go, 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 go. And I know that before COVID, I was very much kind of like go, 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 go. I don't know if you have seen this meme or whatever, where it's like club, never club, never club. That, literally, I wasn't at the club. It was work, this project, next project, go, go, go. Come home, eat quickly, go to bed, do it again.
Mm.
And I remember that thinking that, oh yeah, that's actually quite good. I feel busy.
Mm.
But COVID made me sit down and think, girl, what the hell were you doing? And then also being diagnosed made me think, wow, you were really kind of just going for it because you felt that that was what was working. And in the end, realizing it didn't work. So just knowing that I can give myself that time and it's okay, like you said, like not even looking at rest as radical, looking at rest as a necessity. It's I,
Right.
it's needed,
Right.
absolutely needed, and it's okay. And also because therapy has also helped tremendously,
Mm.
because I know that sometimes you have that voice, you have the 101 things that goes on. As ADHD, my brain does not stop,
Mhm.
and sometimes it feels kind of like, I have to complete this, I have to complete this. And I remember kind of like one of my sessions where my therapist was like, but why do you? And I was like, yeah. I never really asked that question because I never gave my brain the opportunity to ask the question. So it's even through therapy and just kind of just like reframing. Again, it's not perfect because some days you're just kind of like the ADHD gets the betterment of you. And if you hear something that might feel like you might feel triggered by, sometimes it will take you to that place. But it's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to feel those emotions. It's also what you do afterwards for yourself and not allowing that to change kind of the toolbox and the things that you have been building for yourself to make sure you are at a place where you're not allowing certain things to make you feel exhausted. That toolbox has still been built. And there are some things where I'm just like, yeah, that works. Or some things are just like, yeah, girl, nah, I don't know. That's not a bit of you. And that's okay. Let's try something else. So that's what I found, like, yeah, reframe, even kind of like when I think about my confidence, even in work environments, I'm no longer thinking about, and I don't know for you, I felt like once I was no longer masking, I pretty much was like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. And also, I don't know whether that's with age as well. It just got to a point I don't
Yeah.
care. Like, I really don't. And if that's what you think about me, that's a you problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I cannot, and that isn't to say that that's a thing, like I'm perfect at it, because there are times where you can, but clearly I'm on your mind, and I don't care. Like, I'm still gonna live my life. I've still got things to do. I'm still gonna continue with my thing. And if I sit there and allow that to kind of like sit in my mind and fester, I only cause more pain to myself, not the other person. So I've just learned to just kind of just be like, yeah, saying no if I can't do it, or saying that, or being kind of like not feeling guilty for like, oh, I'm not feeling well today. I just can't. Like there's been times where I'm just like, I've woken up and I've just felt so anxious. I'm like, I text my manager. I said, I'm feeling anxious today. I don't think I can do the whole work thing. It's like, okay, take your time. Brilliant. Because I can no longer sit there and just be like coming into that space and
Yeah.
having to play up to
We're not
this
doing it
thing
no
where I'm not
more.
not doing it
Mm-mm.
anymore.
Mm-mm.
And
Oh,
that
I'm so
isn't to
proud of
say,
you. Come on.
yeah, and that isn't to say that there aren't spaces where you can do that. I think I've just built up this to this place where I've been hurt in the past, and I'm not going to allow the next thing or the next space that I enter to make me feel like what the last place had done, because I know the last place had done a number on me, and I know the effects it had, and going forward, no, because they get to go on and live their lives while I'm sitting here having
That
to deal
part.
with all of the things, all of the negative thoughts, all of the trigger warnings, suicidal feelings, ideation, no longer. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I hope that people can pick up what I was trying to put down,
Oh, that was
you
so
know.
clear. It was so clear, Jules. And yeah, absolutely. Saying no for me this last year has definitely helped me reframe. Like, people always laugh, like, I'm a Capricorn. So Capricorn by nature, like, we just busybodies, workaholics anyhow. But I do genuinely think also a big part of my life has been rooted in extraction. Like, what can people gain from me? And that has been rooted in colonialism and these ideas that a person is only valuable if they can produce things or overwork, or what success is, and what the ideas of value and exchange must be. And all of that, I have said no. Said who? Whose rules were these that I'm now subscribed to? And it has been the most beautiful unlearning of so many habits about productivity, about health, about rest that has really helped me tap back into my body. Like, I am so sensitive again, which is literally why I just coughed, because I'm like, hay fever, I opened my window. Like, like super sensitive. Um, but like the second a niggle will happen in my body, I can feel it straight away. So that's also allowed me to now go through the process of titration. Like, I knew for me that's something that was quite an anxiety of potentially trialing medication, but I didn't have the capacity to be doing that on top of a work craziness. So like, I'm actually now able to sense my body and really know, is this a decision I want to make? So that's been able to happen. I've also left the relationship I was in, because also when you're clouded by everything else, sometimes you're in unhealthy situations that are just comfort and your body just needing familiarity, because it's just the thing that is helping you cope. And sometimes not all coping habits are healthy ones. And I was with a narcissist. And I am so glad my ancestors said nope, because it also means that I am now, in a healthier space in my heart. It felt like the easiest like breakup I've ever experienced, which feels so rooted in like, no, that was him.
Yeah.
And like, of course you play roles in breakups, blah blah blah, but like, no, that was him. And that feels super like clear in a way that I don't think I've been able to experience love before. So I'm really excited to like date again. I think for rest, I think for like rest and sleep, I am not a night owl. I am actually an early bird. I wake up and I am so productive first thing in the morning. But my whole life, I always thought I had to do things at stupid o'clock. But that was only the only space I had left for myself, which is why that happened. I don't need that anymore as my caveat to squish myself into. And actually, it means my kind of rhythms and bodily rhythms are like more regular, which has made everything like clockwork. I can feel when I'm ovulating, which is like, oh, my body's back. There's just so many sensitivities which are deeply rooted in my ADHD and are super heightened sensitivities, but things that I wasn't able to even feel. And I guarantee, had I even in education as a child, or because I was an overachieving child also, I was, like all of these things, I was never really given space to like listen to myself, even since I was super young. And this period, this last 10 months, has really helped me to just tune back into myself and really find, what do I want and what do I need and what is necessity. And my necessities right now is joy. My necessities right now is rest. My necessities right now are really kind of having that autonomy to choose. And I've booked a holiday. I've like, all the things that I've really put off, I'm now saying yes to, because they are now my priority. And I am putting all my projects that I want to do primary. And anything past that, I trust that I've done the groundwork and I have all the qualifications I need to go back to any workplace I need to be in. And I know that wholeheartedly. And I don't need anything external to qualify me on that. If I need a skill, I also have a brain that can learn one very quickly. So I'm good. Like, the
Period.
trust,
Yeah.
the trust in me after betting on myself is like tenfold now, and not from a place of like ego, but also just from healthy detachment. My value in me is not attached now to productivity, to anything that is outside of me. It's genuinely from, what does my body, what does my heart, what does my spirit really desire, and I say yes to that. And the second anything gives me a full-bodied no, it's absolutely not. And yeah, that's where I'm sitting right now, and hope we can kind of go there more often and live there.
That is so beautiful. And as you were saying that, it just made me think of kind of just like um, about everything when it comes to us as black women. The moment we choose ourselves, the moment we choose our bodies, the moment we choose our passions and what is valuable, like you said, that offers us joy and peace, that is the moment where the transition happens. and you kind of just come into yourself, and like it feels like your body, your mind and soul starts to connect, and like actually like it's the pieces to the puzzle is connected
With
and it's
ease.
with ease, and it's just so beautiful finally just having the moment where you are able to listen when you once wasn't able to. And that, again, we know is because of various different factors, from being late diagnosed, from having to show up the racial exhaustion, having to be in spaces where you're having to, we hear the saying, work twice as hard, all of these sort of stuff. When you choose yourself, when you unmask from all of that, and it's so crazy because I feel like having the ADHD diagnosis made me just sort of like, it wasn't even necessarily like a crutch or an excuse. It was okay,
Same.
this is what it was. It's not that I'm not trying, it's this. But you know what? Rather than look at it as how society wants me to look at what ADHD is, I'm going to make sure I am using it in a way where I am no longer trying to keep up with what society is expecting me to look like and choosing me.
Very, very that. And I think that is a beautiful note to end our episode on. Thank you so much, Juliana. Of course, for anyone who is listening, if this conversation has resonated with you, you can find resources attached and ways to connect with ADHD babes in the notes. Thank you so much, Jules, for the episode. Please tell us where we can find and learn more about you. Please.
Yeah, so you can find me on ADHD Babes. As I mentioned, I'm the podcast producer. So you can find me on the ADHD Babes Instagram podcast page. And yeah.
Thank you. To our listeners, if you have found a sense of home here at ADHD Babes, consider supporting us. That could mean signing up as a member, donating, or even sharing this podcast with your people. Every bit helps us keep doing this beautiful work. Join the conversation on our Discord or WhatsApp group for members. Follow on our socials. We have our very own Insta page now for the podcast, which is adhdbabes.pod, P-O-D, as well as ADHD Babes. Subscribe to our YouTube for the video version of this podcast, and most importantly, stay connected. We're building this together. Thank you for listening, and see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. If you're a Black woman or non-binary person and need help and support in managing your ADHD or advice on diagnosis, please visit adhdbabes.com. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. Join us in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, all the love from the ADHD Babes team.
Just as I am, can